The greatest moments of every NBA season always come in the playoffs. That's simply just how it goes. I mean, we always remember the playoff game winners and clutch shots more times than not compared to the regular season. Just look at Kawhi's quadruple bounce last year and Lillard's wave goodbye. And ultimately, the best teams make it the furthest in the playoffs to nobody's surprise. That's simply just how it goes. Well, what if I told you that was nearly not the case in a specific playoffs, with that being the 2015 NBA playoffs? What's going on, guys? SMH Super Mario Hoops back with some more hoops. And today I'm here to discuss the untold what-if of the 2015 NBA playoffs that nobody ever brings up. So without further ado, let's get into it. So for this video, the primary topic revolves around the second round matchups. So we got the Warriors versus Grizzlies, the Rockets and the Clippers, the Hawks and the Wizards, and the Cavaliers versus the Bulls. Now the higher seed is the first team in each matchup I just listed, but what if I told you every one of those higher seeds was down 2-1 to their respective opponent in the second round? And this is the big what if, because every single lower seed was up 2-1 in the series at the same time. The Grizzlies over the Warriors, the Clippers over the Rockets, Wizards over the Hawks, and the Bulls over the Cavaliers. What's even crazier is that none of them could close out the series. Yep, the higher seed came back in all four of those series to win and move on to the conference finals. But what were the realistic possibilities of each of those teams moving on? And would it have changed anything? Let's break down each series. So looking at the Grizzlies and Warriors series, after going up 2-1, the Warriors would win the next 3 games. Now obviously Mike Conley was playing through a facial fracture, but ultimately the biggest factor for them losing the next 3 games, all by double digits, was the horrible play of Marc Gasol. In games 4 to 6, Gasol averaged solid numbers, about 19 points a game, 12 rebounds, 5 assists, but he shot 22 of 66 from the field, which is about 33%. He did have 5 blocks in game 6, but it really didn't matter with how many 3-pointers the Warriors were making. Zach Randolph was arguably the most consistent Grizzlies player of that series, and you'd expect Gasol to step up considering he was named an All-Star that season. However, even if Gasol stepped up, I don't really see them beating the Warriors, so I don't really give this one too much of a strong possibility. As for the Clippers versus Rockets series, the Clippers were the only lower seed in the second round to force a Game 7. Or should I say, Houston forced the Game 7 on them. Many of us know the Clippers were up 3-1, and then obviously the Rockets took Game 5. And Game 6 looked all but over for a Clippers win. But then, the unlikely heroes rose, of Josh Smith and Corey Brewer. They completely took over in Game 6. And with James Harden struggling shooting pretty much all series, and Houston's backs against the wall, they needed a miracle to happen to get past these Clippers. And sure enough, it did. Houston outscored the Clippers 40-15 in the fourth quarter of that game, behind 38 combined points, 16 combined rebounds, 11-23 combined shooting, and 6-12 combined from 3, with a plus-minus of 43 between both Corey Brewer and Josh Smith. Now, as we know, Houston also took Game 7, and many point the fingers to Chris Paul and Blake Griffin, but in reality, the bench failed them. Jamal Crawford shot a horrible 34% from the field and 27% from 3. Matt Barnes also shot about 35% from the field and 19% from 3. And obviously Chris Paul did miss 2 games in the series where they ended up splitting 1-1. So it could have been a different outcome if that weren't the case. So I think there's a realistic case that the Clippers could have won this series. Moving on to the Wizards versus the Hawks, we all remember this series for one thing in particular.
Did you call bank? I call game.
But did you guys know in Game 6, Paul Pierce also hit a shot that would have forced overtime? But he released the ball a fraction too late. Overall though, John Wall missed games 2 through 4 with an injured left wrist, in which Washington went 1-2 in the games without him. However, to combat that, they also went 1-2 in the games with him. And while this Wizards team was very fun to watch, especially for Paul Pierce because he was near the end of his prime, or really the end of his career. I wouldn't even say it was his prime at that point. But there's also a big argument to be made that DeMarre Carroll outplayed him. Carroll put up about 17 points a game, just under 7 rebounds a game, about 1.5 assists, 1.3 steals a game on 50% from the field, and nearly 41% from 3. Along with this, Atlanta was one of the deepest teams for that season and more deep than Washington as well. So this is a great series with nearly all nail-biters. I don't really know if the Wizards could have pulled it off, but either way, it was one of the best series for this postseason. I wouldn't completely count the Wizards out though. And the last one is the Bulls versus the Cavaliers. So we all remember the iconic Derrick Rose game winner in Game 3 to send the Bulls fans home happy. But we also remember Game 4, where LeBron sent the Bulls home with the opposite reaction. And in Game 4, the Bulls had a lead going into the fourth quarter that they lost pretty quickly, and they had to come back from, which they did, and Derrick Rose hit the game-tying layup. Now at this point, David Blatt was signaling for a timeout while the refs never gave him one, and after the game they said that they should have. But the important thing here is that the Cavs had no timeouts. This would have meant that the Bulls get to shoot a free throw and get possession, and to put it simply, they pretty much would have gone up 3-1 in this series. And with Jimmy Butler holding LeBron to under 40% from the field for one of only 5 times in LeBron's career, and Derrick Rose pretty much outplaying Kyrie Irving for that series, I think this Bulls team would have had definitely a realistic chance of moving on to the conference finals. Overall though, if every lower seed had won, we're looking at 2 teams in the Western Conference with no NBA championships, and neither of them had even been to the NBA Finals. And 2 teams in the Eastern Conference that hadn't won a championship since 1978 and 1998 for the Wizards and Bulls respectively. With none of these teams even being in the NBA Finals either at all, or the most recently being in 1998, that would have created such a suspenseful and entertaining Final Four. A completely new field that we haven't seen in pretty much 17 years would have been extremely electrifying and intriguing. But ultimately, everything happens for a reason, and we can't go back and change it. But I think this is a topic that people always overlook when it's so fascinating to weigh out the possibilities. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're looking forward to more content like this, I suggest also hitting the notification bell so that you'll know every time I post. Also, be sure to comment what other ideas would you like me to discuss. I mean, you guys have been putting some in previous videos, and I'm going to keep looking at the comments because ultimately I like NBA content, so I'm going to look at it and see what I can make out of it. That's pretty much going to do it for me, and yeah, I'm out. Peace.